Hello, everybody. Welcome to this fine Friday podcast, Concealed Carry podcast, coming to you on Friday. Um, yep. It's Matthew and I. We are doing a Justified Saves episode today, which means we are covering defensive gun use stories, DGUs. We have a bunch today because we started with a massive list. I know that Matthew had probably already culled down to a massive list, like from an even more massive list. And then we had to work to cull that down even further because there was a bunch.
It's a wild month. A wild month.
It's the wild, wild west, or east in some cases.
All of the
east
above.
is the new west.
Yeah. It's crazy. I mean, I don't know. This was a in these stories, just for you guys that are like waiting for us to go live and all that. They're a wide variety. Can I say that? What?
Yeah.
They're not all like home invasions and carjackings, which are prevalent, but there's some different ones. So interesting.
Yep. Including one that didn't quite make the final cut, that involved a naked man attacking a woman on her lawnmower, and then her husband stepped in and ended up having to shoot the guy.
And that one didn't make it, guys and gals. That one didn't make it.
That gives you a taste, a sense of, like, if that didn't make it, then what stayed in the outline for the show today. I'd say that one almost made it, and some people probably like, well, I want to still hear that story. I pretty much just gave you the story: naked man attacks woman on lawnmower, and husband intervenes, and husband then gets attacked, and husband draws and shoots. There you go. So anyway, pretty crazy. So looks like we got a good crowd here with us today. 25 of you watching right now. Thank you so much. Welcome, Frankie, Clyde, and Randy. Thank you for joining. Thank you for your comments. Guys, we'll go ahead and get started here momentarily. If this is your first time joining us, the way this works is we record our audio podcast. It gets published to the Concealed Carry Podcast audio feeds throughout all the world, whether you prefer to listen on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Audible, TuneIn. I know I'm missing a bunch. There's a bunch of them out there. Those are some of the major podcast hubs, if you will. Whether you'd like to listen to any one of those, well, what we're about to start here in a moment is what we record, and that's what goes out on that podcast feed. If you are not able to join us every time we do one of these live shows when we record the podcast, we'll just make sure you're subscribed to the podcast somewhere, and you can catch all the episodes on the podcast feed and listen at your own leisure. Looking forward to it today. Again, this is our Justified Saves episode, which we do once per month, and it's typically one of the first episodes of each month. You ready to do it, Matthew?
Let's do it, man.
All right. Hey, Dustin, thanks for being here, my friend. Curtis, hello. Mark. I thought that title might get some people. What's this about kids with AR15's? Because the title is Justified Saves, AR15's, 9mm's, and children. Yeah, that's a little bit. Well, we'll explain. We'll get into it. Hello, Connor. Thanks for joining. All right, here we go. In 3, 2, 1. This is the Concealed Carry Podcast, Season 6, Episode 13. And welcome to the Concealed Carry Podcast, part of the concealedcarry.com network of shows, brought to you by Mountain Man Medical. Today is Friday, June 3rd, 2022, as of the recording of this episode. And I am your host, Riley Bowman, joined today by our amazing producer extraordinaire, Matthew Maruster.
I'm here, man. You called in the backup, so I'm good. Doing good here.
Called in the backup. Welcome to the show, guys. Speaking of our network of shows, just a reminder that you might consider listening or checking out some of our other podcasts, such as the Firearm Trainers podcast, for those of you that are firearm trainers or instructors out there, maybe aspiring instructors. Lots of great interviews and topics of discussion on that show, hosted by our man, Rob Beckman. Also, the Off Duty, On Duty podcast, you can find hosted by Brian Eastridge. which covers a variety of topics from the law enforcement and armed citizen side of things. Lots of great episodes there as well. This is the Concealed Carry Podcast, and this is our monthly Justified Saves episode, which is where we bring to you justified or defensive gun use stories, DGUs, from around the country. It's always a good time to, not that these stories are a good time, right? But it's a good time to kind of cull through the interwebs and pull all these out of the ether and bring them to you, because it's important, I think, that we talk about these kinds of incidents, what we can learn from them. That's the real big key, how they can make us better, more mindful, more prepared citizen defenders, civilian or concealed carriers. So today's episode sponsored by CCW Safe. They happen to sponsor each episode we do on Justified Saves because, hey, you know what? While we don't wish it upon any of you, our audience, if something like one of these stories we talk about today happens to you, you're going to want CCW Safe backing you up, because I believe they have the best self-defense program out there for concealed carriers and self-defense minded folk. Not only do they have zero limit to what they are willing to spend to defend your case, but they'll also cover your bail bond amount up to $100,000. They will cover you in case of red flag law issues. They'll replace your gun if it's confiscated as part of a self-defense use incident. There's so many wonderful coverages available through CCW Safe, but most importantly of all is that the dudes there running, and I should say dudettes, running the company, answering the phones, taking those emergency calls, they truly, truly care, and they respond immediately. And you're getting not just customer service people on the phone, but you're getting their top people immediately. I actually just had dinner over the weekend with a couple of their top executives, and they're actually showing us how the system works when they get an emergency call that comes in. And all of them are on a text tree that is automated, that as soon as something comes in, it hits all of that response team of folks. And so they see immediately, hey, here's member so-and-so, member number, whatever. Here's the incident that's taking place in such and such location. More details to follow, or guys, landing gear up, keys ignitions, like time to go sort of stuff. Really, really impressive, and very, very fast response time from the folks at CCW Safe. That was really, really cool to kind of get a little bit of an insider glance at how they operate when those emergency calls come in, and they do come in. So if you're looking for self-defense, legal protection, and coverage, please consider joining CCW Safe today. Go to ccwsafe.com. Use the discount code CC Podcast to save 10% off membership of CCW Safe. Guardian Nation members save even more. Again, ccwsafe.com. Today's other episode sponsor is ReadyUpGear.com and the Ready Up Gear Roger 22 ear protecting muffs. So over the ear protection from Ready Up Gear, and the model is the Roger 22s. I've got mine in my range bag just over here behind me here. I've been using mine every chance I can at the range, every range session, practice session, class I teach, competition that I attend and shoot. My Ready Up Gear Roger 22s go with me, together with the Ready Up Gear gel ear, the soft seals are called. That's the product name, but they are gel ear cups that you put onto the Roger 22s as well, which enhance them and really make them feel like high dollar ear pro. Very natural sounding, electronically amplified audio that comes through them. Very, very natural sounding. I can have conversations with people and it doesn't feel like I have anything on at all. Really, really impressive product for a very amazing price. Go to readyupgear.com. Look at the Roger 22 Ear Pro today, and also consider the soft seals too. They're very inexpensive, but massive upgrade to those earmuffs. You got the Roger 22s, right, as well?
I do, and the soft seals. Yeah. Awesome.
You like them?
Yeah, guys, if you don't like over the ear hearing protection, this isn't a plug for like the soft seals, but I'm just saying if you have any hearing protection, even if you don't use the Roger 22s, check out the soft seals because it will change the way like you won't get those headaches, you won't have that hot spot on your ear. It's a better seal. I'm just telling you, it's well worth it.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool stuff, man. As Mark was noting, CCI has the best deal on CCW safe protection, and that is true. As to my knowledge, you can't find a more aggressive discount off membership than being a Guardian Nation member and using that discount off. I think it's a 20% discount. So that's pretty good. All right, let's get to our first story. Top story, Matthew. Why don't you tell us about this incident out of Charleston, West Virginia? Good gal with a gun, woman with pistol kills gunman at party.
Yeah, you guys probably have heard about this. It happened. This was May 26th, so not too long ago, but it was shared quite extensively on social media. But this happened, like you said, Charleston, West Virginia. Charleston police said a woman's actions on Wednesday night may have prevented a mass casualty event. Most likely did, because according to police, around 10:45 on Wednesday night, this dude cruises into a parking lot. Well, early in the day, this guy cruises into the parking lot where there's a party. He's driving extremely fast. Somebody at the party confronts him. It says basically like, it doesn't say what they said, just, hey, slow down or whatever. He said he was going to come back. He comes back later in the evening to the apartment complex, and with an AR, gets out of the car and starts cranking rounds off towards the people at the party. One of the ladies at the party, police say a bystander attending the party quickly pulled out her pistol and fired at Butler, who was the lunatic shooting into the crowd, fatally injuring him. Police said instead of running from the threat, she engaged the threat and saved several lives last night. She was lawfully carrying a firearm, stopped a threat. There was a graduation party and a party with kids. So obviously someone just graduated high school and we could have had a casualty shooting. So at this time, says no one's been charged. No kidding. But yeah, with all that was going on in the news, right? With the tragic shootings and everything like that, this kind of went under the radar. But this is one of those stories of, when you do have somebody who's armed right away and, can intervene. Sometimes that's all it takes to kind of stop the problem before it gets out of hand. So kudos to this woman. Didn't say her name or anything, but yeah, kudos to her.
Yeah. This is a phenomenal story. This came very shortly after another very terrible event that happened in Texas that pretty much everybody should be familiar with by about now, because this one happened on Wednesday. Let's see, this was last Wednesday. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Uvalde happened the day before or thereabouts. Yeah, I think it was Tuesday of last week. So this was the next day, right? Obviously, everybody's very sensitive about these sorts of things on the heels of such another terrible event. And here we have something that appears to have been initiated because a man was offended about being told, hey, there's kids in the area, let's slow down, right? Which is a wholly reasonable request. If I got my kids out and about in a neighborhood or in a community or whatever, yeah, I'm sensitive about that. I've got kids of my own. They're sometimes out and about playing. Maybe they're in the driveway, shooting hoops or whatever. We got a little basketball hoop and all that, and we put out the little yellow, kids at play sign and stuff, as just a gentle reminder. And most people are pretty respectful of that. This guy did not want to respect this person's wishes and decided to come back with an AR and shoot at a bunch of people, including kids. Amazingly, no one else was injured, which is phenomenal. either he was terrible at aiming or wasn't fully committed to the act. Regardless, here we have a man with an AR and a woman that draws her pistol, probably a 9mm. Could be wrong, but it could have been, right? Which is there's a sense of irony here after our president just talked about the dangers of AR-15's, which again, yes, one was being used inappropriately here, and also those high caliber 9mm bullets that blow the lungs out of people's chests.
Come on now.
But amazingly, what is probably a 9mm, and it might not be even a true 9mm, but still 9mm caliber, and like maybe it's a 380. You know, that's still the same diameter bullet, right? Just a bit of irony here in that she used her own carried pistol and stopped a man with an AR-15. This is far from being a unique event in that, you know, these sorts of things do in fact happen. The anti-gun side frequently uses terminology to the effect of, you know, the whole good guy or good gal with a gun idea is a myth. It is far from a myth. This happens actually more commonly than most people realize. We've covered similar stories like this before. I'm reminded of, remember the one in like Oklahoma someplace, maybe in Tulsa or something like that, and like it was some guy that went into a restaurant and was shooting the place up, and two guys, not one, but two guys. Now it's unfortunate they didn't have their guns on them, but they run out to their cars and they get their guns and they go back in and, you know, put a stop to it. And, you know, so anyway, people wondering about the title of today's episode, AR-15's, 9mm's, and children. This first story has all three of those things. But there's other stories, more good stuff to come here. Bravo to this woman for taking her and the protection of others seriously enough to have her gun with her and on her person, and being willing to step up and put an end to what could have been a very, very terrible event, much worse than what it ended up being.
Yeah, I mean, it's a choice to carry a firearm, right? Like, and it's a responsibility, and it goes beyond just, you know, being a good shooter, right? Like being able to shoot a target, right? Like it's beyond that, and I think that's the disconnect between people that don't carry a firearm for self-defense or personal defense, and those of you that are listening, or, you know, because we understand the reality that, you know, you don't go to a party thinking someone's going to come and shoot it up with an AR for just because you told them to slow down. Like, no, right? So like the idea that like, oh, I just carry when I go to dangerous places. I don't know. Maybe this was the most dangerous apartment complex in the world. I don't know. But like, I'm just saying, you don't think that that's what it's. And so it's a lifestyle. It's a mentality of like, hey, preparedness, vigilance, and you know, and responsibility. And we, you know, that's why I think these stories are so important to cover.
Yeah, 100%. And that, I mean, that's one of the reasons why we do the Justified Saves episode, is we want people to hear about, we want people to see the positive benefits of an armed populace. Kind of like, you know, just on this episode comes on the heels of the episode I did, the interview I did with Dave Kopel earlier this week, talking about that very idea of how often do armed citizens put a stop to crime. And well, as we know, listening to that episode and looking at the most recent data on the matter, well over 1 million, 1.6 million, in fact, each year on average, instances where armed citizens put a stop to crime. And while they are not nearly as commonplace, there's many, many instances where armed citizens put a stop to active shooter events as well. Woman waves gun in road rage incident. Man fires back in self-defense, according to WSFA.com, Tuscaloosa, Alabama. This started as a road rage incident in Tuscaloosa in a parking lot. In fact, the bad gal in this one pulled into a parking lot and confronted a man and his girlfriend, believing that they had affronted her. They had offended her by cutting her off in traffic. She pulls in behind them in the parking lot, jumps out, confronts them, points a gun at them, and the man fires a weapon in return. Did not strike her that we know of. It didn't say anything about that. It says it hit her vehicle. Apparently, that was enough to get her to stop what she was doing. That's that rude awakening that occurs. When you think you're the one that's in control, you're the one that's waving the gun around. Next thing you know, you're the one being shot at. Ooh, didn't sign up for that, did she? So she was taken into custody and charged with menacing. So, and the man, it says here, who fired shots, acted in self-defense and was not charged.
Man, yeah. How many of these stories do you think are started with, subsequent to a road rage incident? Like so many of these, it's just like, man, just try to live peaceably as much as you can, man. Like, just, it's not worth it.
We've covered a bunch of road rage incidents recently. We've obviously covered, it's not a new phenomenon, but it does seem that in recent history on the podcast, we've been seeing quite a few of these.
Mm-hmm.
Like at least one every episode, and sometimes more than one. Whereas it, in my recollection, was formerly a little bit more rare. That's not a good thing. Obviously, we know that some of those are unfortunately ones that I think concealed carriers get involved in and can't get in control of their emotions. And that's a problem because that does not reflect well on the rest of us law-abiding armed citizens. We have no idea about, whether this lady had a permit for, carrying a gun concealed or anything like that. If she has a history of priors or anything like that, no idea. Doesn't really matter. In this case, she did something wrong, and the man she confronted was lawfully carrying and did return fire.
Mm-hmm.
Going now to this story, and it happened in Albertsons parking lot. The title of it is, and this happened in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Man shot in Albertsons parking lot, arrested for aggravated assault, sheriff's office says. This according to theadvocate.com. Matthew, give us a rundown on this one.
All right. So here we go. So we got a 22-year-old kid, young man. He's loading groceries in his car in a parking lot of Albertsons, and he begins to argue with a man sitting with two young children in a nearby white sedan. All right. Okay, just remember, it's a guy with his two kids in the car arguing with another dude in the parking lot. Argument escalates. The documents say the suspect here tells the other man, "I will shoot you with a gun." At which point he goes to his vehicle, grabs his gun with what the report says, his right hand, and approaches the white sedan. Victims tell the detectives that the suspect begins to walk backwards and appear to be raising his right arm. I can only imagine he's holding it sideways as he's appearing to walk backwards. And maybe he's, grabbing other parts of his body as he's yelling, curse words and things. But before Young, this is the guy in the car, or this is the suspect Young, could do anything else, the man grabs his own gun from the car's center console, fires a shot through the roll down front passenger window with his kids in the car next to him. This is all going on. And apparently he doesn't remember getting out of the car, or he may have or may not have, but he doesn't remember, and shot the guy. It doesn't say how many times he shot. Young, this is the suspect, and the victim start to argue again. I guess that wasn't enough. The shootout wasn't enough to kind of quell their anger towards one another. So the guy who instigated this, or brought the gun into the fight to begin with, jumps in his own car, takes off out of the parking lot, and drives himself to the hospital. And then sheriff or police end up going to the hospital, picking this dude up at the hospital, book him into jail. 3 counts of aggravated assault with the firearm, probably the guy and his 2 kids. But I mean, this is crazy, right? Like, I'm not saying, he just, you got your kids in the car. Don't be, if you can at all, just don't get into arguments with people. Get your family out of there. It's not worth it. You don't know. Dude grabs a gun and now, you're putting your kids at risk and things like that. Good thing he had the firearm with him, of course, but maybe this could have gone a different way had egos not gotten in the way. I don't know. I'm speculating a little bit, but yeah, this is a wild one. Thank God that none of the kids at least were injured or anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes you wonder, what really started this. We don't get that kind of detail, obviously. We just know that we have one man says in this case, he's the bad guy. He's the guy that grabs a gun first and threatens the father with his kids. But he's just loading his groceries into his car. And next thing we know, we have an argument between him and this father with 2 children. But the problem here is it escalates. Mm-hmm. And there's probably, like what would have happened had the father, in this case, the innocent party, as it's ruled legally, what would have happened if he had simply brushed whatever occurred off or withdrew from this verbal altercation that occurred, right? Probably we don't have a shooting. We probably don't have a whole mess of other things that obviously followed that, the initial altercation here. So I think you hit on that, really well as far as the lessons to be learned from this. But that's how fast things can, get out of control. I mean, one minute you're just, somebody, it's kind of like the man speeding through the neighborhood or whatever. And, lady's like, hey, slow down, there's kids. Well, again, you don't think anything's going to come, that there's not going to be any consequences. And again, I think, telling people to slow down when there's kids in the area is probably completely reasonable, but we have to be prepared for what ifs. You happen to say the wrong thing to the wrong person on the wrong day, and next thing you know, you're facing a deadly threat. So, alrighty, now going to Jacob's favorite state. Too bad he's not with us for this one. Of Wyoming. We don't see many DGU stories out of Wyoming. Partly because there's nobody that lives there. And probably because everybody carries a gun, and an armed society is a polite society, right? It's not like, for any of you that watch or are fans of the show Longmire, which is based in a fictional Wyoming county that happens to be probably the most deadly county in the U.S. based on the number of murders that Longmire has to solve there alone. Wyoming is generally not like that. Okay, but in this instance, in Riverton, Wyoming, we have a situation where a 31-year-old woman, she's just at home one night with her boyfriend, and her ex-boyfriend decides to show up. This 24-year-old man, somehow, it doesn't go into a great deal of detail, but it does say he broke into a secured front door and physically attacked another man inside the home, presumably the boyfriend of this woman. She grabbed a handgun and it says here, she didn't feel she had any other choice but to use deadly force to stop the attack and protect herself and the other man. She fired, I believe it was 1 shot, and the ex-boyfriend was struck a total of 1 time. He's transported to the hospital and later flew to another hospital, because hospital in Riverton's not a very, big hospital. Does say he has serious injuries. And Fremont County Sheriff's Office there says everything seems to point to the female's claim of self-defense as being true. So there you go. This is just another example of domestic type incidents that we see fairly commonly, unfortunately, and what the importance there is that exists of those that might become victims of domestic violence, and why I think it's important that they have tools available at their disposal. I mean, you have the left, anti-gunners. Sorry, Mark, I used the word left. We have anti-gunners out there, primarily on the left side of the aisle, that would say that, hey, you know, like that woman, that gun's just going to get taken out of her hands and used against her. And certainly those stories do exist, and we've actually talked about them a couple of times on this show. But by and large, we cover a number of DV type incidents, um, you know, many times over the course of a year, where these victims are using a gun successfully in defense against an ex-lover of some kind. And so it's a difficult deal, but kudos to this woman for taking her own protection into her own hands and being her own first responder.
Yeah, and I think we mentioned, I don't know what episode, you know, one of these episodes in the past, but we talked about how a lot of times, you know, and you guys listening might have heard this from somebody who's anti-gun, say, well, a lot of the people that use guns to defend themselves, they're not using it against strangers. They're using it against people they know. Like, you know, in the premise or the idea behind that is to say, well, most of them are probably, you know, accidental shootings against somebody that they know, or it's not really that big of a deal, and they accidentally, or, you know, just out of rage, shoot their spouse just because they're angry and it's not really justified. And they'll count stories like of, you know, ex-lover or former boyfriend or whatever, and it's like it's missing the point of, you know, like, yes, like people that, you know, also turn out to be, you know, people that pose a deadly threat to you. That can certainly happen, and you deserve to be able to defend yourself against them just as much as, you know, the stranger that, you know, comes to your door and wants to do whatever, right? Like, so that's just kind of like one of those smokescreen red herring type arguments that get you off of what the reality is that, you know, women, men, kids, elderly, you know, use firearms to defend themselves all the time.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. All right, Matthew, why don't you tell us about this next one? This one comes to us from Walnut,
California.
It's California. Yep. LA County Sheriff's Department is the responding agency, according to the article here on KTLA.com. Resident fatally shoots suspected burglar in Walnut. Second suspect sought.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out what part of the body the walnut is, but apparently the burglar got shot in Walnut. But anyways, anyways, so this is kind of a wild one. So this is at 4 a.m. In Walnut, some place in LA County. Deputies respond to a burglary in progress. This is 4 a.m. Met by a 27-year-old male and a 26-year-old female. They're the homeowners. When they get there, they tell the deputies that while they were inside the home at 4 a.m, they're sleeping, they hear footsteps inside their home. Okay, so this is different than just, you know, I heard a noise outside or I heard something. This is footsteps. So you assume, you know, if you're hearing footsteps that are connected to feet that are connected to some bad guy who's in your home, that unwanted, right? The article says, while searching for the source of the noise, so remember that, the man was confronted by a male suspect who is armed with a handgun, and both people opened fire. I'm assuming the homeowner and the suspect who's in the home unwanted or uninvited. The unidentified suspect suffered gunshot wounds to her upper body. He was pronounced dead at the scene. Handgun belonging to substance was found. The residents were not injured. And, you know, before I hand it over to you, and I'll just take like the big softball here. Like, we constantly preach, like, hey, if you know somebody's in your home, the best idea is to, you know, get to a safe place where you have your family in one room or one location and defend that part of the home. call police, announce that you have a firearm, that they need to leave, instead of going to search. In this case, he went out. They go out to search for the person that they assume is in the home, and the guy's armed with a gun. And thank God this guy shot him, but he could have easily been shot at the same time, and they both could have shot. We have stories like that where they both get shot and both die. And so the best way to survive is to try to not get involved in a shooting. And this is why we say, like, primarily, it's not a great idea to go searching through your house at night to find somebody. If you know for sure somebody's in your home, you hear footprints or footsteps, right? Like, secure your family in one area home. You don't have to worry about pass through and all that. And it's safer. Certainly there are times where you may have to pass through your home or get to your kid's room or something. But we're talking about like searching the home, going through closets and looking under beds and stuff. Probably not the best, safest plan, right?
Yeah. Yep. No, we've touched on that many times on the show. And it's a tough one. You hear a noise, and I mean, there's something. Like it obviously is our home, and there's something to be said for making sure we're keeping an eye after our home. And looking into things. I mean, I heard a crash the other night. Now, granted, the context there was this was like a week and a half ago. We got a late spring snow, and it was very, very, very wet, very heavy, and actually brought down a couple of large limbs off of the tree in my backyard. So obviously with that context in mind, I hear this crash. Fortunately, didn't damage my home or land on my home, but it was loud enough, got my attention. It was late at night, and I went and took a look. But I was pretty certain I knew what it was. I was just making sure it didn't come down on the house, and fortunately landed in the yard. But this one's interesting because it says that they heard footsteps and they went to investigate. If I hear footsteps, like, very quickly, I need to figure out, is that my child, right? Because I got a few of them to keep track of. And obviously there's usually a difference in sound between the lighter weight footprints of a child and a full grown man, although one of my kids is about full grown. So
probably all of them taller than me.
Probably, actually. Just learned my daughter has just passed up my wife, my 13-year-old daughter. So she's getting to be pretty big herself, and my son is trying his best to catch me. We'll see if he succeeds or not. Anyway, just use your best judgment, but don't be thinking you got to go check out every little thing. And as you said, if somebody's in your home that shouldn't be there, it's far better a plan in most cases, from things that we've encountered, things that we've looked into and researched, that you take up a defensible position within your home. And if they're going to come to you, let them come to you, right? I've got the advantage there in knowing that my space, my family is secured where we are, at least for the time being. And anybody that comes down a particular hallway is likely going to regret that.
Mm-hmm.
And they probably won't know where I am, at least for the first 3 rounds. Or maybe no rounds at all, right? Okay, so obviously we don't want to shoot if we don't have to shoot. But all right, good story there. Brownsboro, Texas, homeowner armed with AR-15 stops burglary suspect. So here, again, the title of today's episode, AR-15's, 9mm's, and children. Well, this one helps make the case for why do we need those scary black guns. Obviously, we've seen ARs be used successfully in a variety of uses for self-defense over the years on the podcast. Here is yet another one. What happened here actually started out as some kind of, the story, they bury the lead, of course. This story starts out with them describing that they did a lockdown of some local school campuses and things because there was a female suspect they were looking for. She was apparently involved in the initial incident, which happened to be that a man broke into a home. The homeowner grabbed his AR and was able to successfully defend himself. Now, amazingly, no shots were fired, but the suspect remained put while the homeowner called police and stood at the ready with his AR. Meanwhile, apparently an accomplice, a female accomplice, made her escape, and that's who they ended up trying to track down, and in the process locking down some schools and things in the area while they did so. And they did not find her, at least as of the reporting of this story, but the initial male suspect who broke into the home was arrested and charged and taken to jail. But hey, here we had this scary black rifle, the AR-15, that was used successfully without even a shot being fired to defend this man and his home and his family, assuming that he had others in the home with him. There you go, Brownsboro, Texas.
Good job.
All right. Here is one of two stories actually involving juveniles that use firearms in defense. And this always brings up an interesting topic of discussion. Matthew, why don't you tell us this first one out of Pulaski County, Kentucky, where a juvenile killed man who was assaulting woman, sheriff's office says. This reported on WKYT.com.
Yeah, and unfortunately, sometimes we get these stories where literally I think in this case, there's 6 sentences, but we're going to try to get as much as we can out of the 6 sentences. Basically, what happens is, says the sheriff's office deputies were called to a shooting Monday night at a home in Poplar Estates Road in Somerset. According to the sheriff's office, 26-year-old Travis Popplewell of Sanford, Kentucky, was assaulting his girlfriend and a juvenile in the home. Okay, so this dude's a total dirtbag. He's beating up his girlfriend and a juvenile kid. When another juvenile who's in the home shot Popplewell with a handgun. Good for him. Popplewell was pronounced dead at the scene by the coroner.
Popplewell got popped.
Yeah, he got smoked by a teen or a juvenile. Here's the thing, and I'll give this back to you for the interesting discussion this brings up. But unfortunately, these stories, there's so much in this story, right? It's more than just the conversation about that we see people use firearms to defend themselves. Yeah, we cover that all the time, but these types of stories have another layer, and it's unfortunate that it's covered so sparsely. And I'll hand it back over to you for the interesting next layer, if you would.
I was saving that Popplewell got popped for quite a while. And then I realized this happened on Poplar Estates Road. So Popplewell got popped on Poplar Estates Road.
Yeah, a lot of popping.
You can't make this crap up, man. Yeah, the interesting thing here, right, is as of yesterday, or a couple days ago, actually, I think it was officially proposed on May 31st. We have this new House Bill 7910, I think is the number. I'm double checking that. Yeah, 7910, Protecting Our Kids Act, which is it's sponsored by Representative Nadler of New York, co-sponsored by Mike Thompson out of California and Sheila Jackson Lee out of Texas. One of the parts of that bill, there's a lot of things that they want to go after with respect to increasing gun control laws in the aftermath of a couple of these terrible shootings that have occurred. One of those is a requirement for firearms to be properly and safely stored, which obviously we know that's the responsible thing to do, and it's something that we have preached consistently here at concealedcarry.com and on the podcast for years. I mean, that's something I'm very passionate about, having many young children of my own. When I first started getting into concealed carry in particular as a serious discipline was basically when my oldest son, who's now 15, was born. And I remember having that aha moment when he was a few months old. He was obviously too small to get around and too small to for a gun to be an issue. But I remember having that. Up to that point, it was just me and my wife, and my gun was just like in the nightstand or whatever, like, okay, whatever. Now all of a sudden I was like, ooh, I need something to properly store that, right? So we're obviously big proponents of the responsible practice of keeping firearms secure from those that shouldn't have access. Meanwhile, we encounter these examples where children, juveniles, usually teenagers, use a gun properly, even in a justified manner, in self-defense, and save their lives or the lives of others in their household. One of the ones that is most pronounced in my mind, Matthew, is I think it was in Las Vegas a few years back, where like a 12 or 13-year-old kid who had a younger sibling with him was in the home, and the home was broken into. And he hid with his sibling in the closet and had, I think it was a 22 rifle.
I think you're right.
And shot an intruder. I think there was multiple intruders. I think shot one of them as they basically made entry into this closet where he was hiding with his sibling. That might have ended very differently if that preteen or barely teenage old kid, if he wasn't able to actually arm himself and defend him and his younger sibling. So that's yeah, I mean, Connor says here, all the more reason to get my daughter into USPSA when she is old enough. I mean, I do think that it's an interesting thing, where we want to talk about responsible storage, and we don't want children necessarily have unauthorized access to firearms. At the same time, can children, particularly in those early teen years and later teen years, can they be responsible enough for such a thing like this? Well, yeah, I think that every family and every household has to make that decision for themselves. So, our next story here is not all that different. We have one out of South Carolina, where the title of it here, and this is actually on a website I've never been on before. It's called truthtent.com. South Carolina boy who's 13 uses his mother's gun to fend off two criminals who were breaking into his home while he was alone. Fatally shoots a burglar and scares off the second suspect, according to police. So it says that, and this was in Charleston County, South Carolina, and it says that he was alone on Tuesday afternoon. I think this was fairly recent. This was 2 weeks ago. He's home alone on Tuesday afternoon. Somebody tries to break in through the back door of the home. He grabbed his mother's gun. It says he waited at the back door. All right, so he knows something's up. He grabs his mom's gun, so he obviously knows where it is. Apparently knows how to use it because of what follows next, and then waits. All right. At some point here, he ends up firing repeatedly through the door, and someone outside shoots back at him. We don't know exactly what led him to shoot or fire those shots. And certainly that could be a controversial thing in and of itself that we've talked about, before, even with adults using justified deadly force in firing through objects such as doors. But I'm not going to go there because this is a 13-year-old child who's probably scared crapless, but grabs his mom's gun and fires and hits 3 times, mind you. 3 times he strikes this suspect who's trying to break into his home. The getaway driver rushes that other suspect who was shot 3 times to the hospital, where he later died of his gunshot wounds. A gray Chevy Sonic was used in the incident. It was also found later with bullet holes, and a gun was retrieved from the home's backyard. The other thing, and this is a sad but important reality of such things, is this article goes on to continue talking about how they interviewed this 13-year-old boy's 57-year-old father about it, and he says his son's not doing very good. He's struggling to deal with the emotional and mental aftermath of this incident, where his son was forced to defend himself and ultimately fired shots and ultimately killed another person in defense. And I truly and sincerely hope that this 13-year-old boy gets some help and that he gets the help he needs. Now, the right mental attitude and understanding of such things is important to have, I think, in terms of being able to deal with the aftermath of a defensive shooting like this. Something that this 13-year-old boy is probably not prepared for, though. So it's super important that and it talks about how he has not yet gotten counseling or psychological help, but I do hope they will follow through and make sure he gets the help he needs. I'm glad that he's alive. I'm glad that he was able to defend himself. I'm glad he had a gun available to do that. Yeah, that's probably controversial to some, a 13-year-old boy that can just grab his mom's Glock, but again, we don't know the circumstances of that household or that family. We don't know the level of training. I have seen 12-year-olds. I've seen 9-year-olds. I'm not suggesting anything here whatsoever that there should be a certain policy. I am saying that I've seen 9-year-old children in USPSA that outshoot grown adults, and maybe not a lot of them, at least in that shooting sport, but I've seen it happen. So it's clear that children can be taught at a relatively young age to be responsible, know how to handle themselves with a firearm in a reasonable manner. So we have to make those decisions for ourselves and for our own families and our own households. I don't believe the government should get in the way of mandating a specific requirement that is most likely going to be set at 18, below 18 years of age. It's illegal for them to have unauthorized access to a firearm. So
yeah. Well, and to expand on that, there's also the push for the age to be, we hear it now, 21 years old for every firearm now. And here's the thing, like, I'm not a gun nut. Like, I don't have guns all over my house, and like, all I talk about all day long is guns. This is not my lifestyle. That's not me. But I do, like, and I think that people that don't know me, or like, hey, you do firearm stuff, they think that like all I do is think about guns, and I think everybody should have guns, and every teacher should, like, look, if you don't want a gun, that's great. Like, if you don't want your kids, you don't think that they're mature enough or trained enough, or you don't like guns, then don't have a gun. And I wouldn't force that on anybody. But like, I think when you start thinking, when the government starts saying arbitrarily, hey, we don't think that kids' brains, since studies show that they're not fully developed until they're 24 years old, we don't think kids should have guns. Well, what's a kid? Well, we're going to cut that off at 21. We don't think that, like, your kid should have access to a firearm inside the home. So therefore, we're going to make a law that makes it mandatory that you lock up your gun. Never, let's not even talking about how do you enforce that, but like, so you're telling me that I can't train my kid at 13 years old to be responsible with the gun and be able to defend themselves? Like, I get it. Maybe clearly you can't put a one size fits all. You can't pick an arbitrary date or age to say that, at this age, somebody's mature or somebody's not, because you have adults that go on and commit mass murder. Like, it's not about like their brain not being developed. It's because they're evil. And so, like, I just think we see stories like this, and, it's sad that this kid has to deal with this for the rest of his life. The other side of that is maybe he's not even here to deal with it, because this dude comes in and does something horrific, or, assaults the kid, and he has to deal with that. So, it's tragic, and I'm not downplaying that whatsoever. Please don't, like, you can write in and say that I have empathy for this young boy. I'm just saying, like, this brings to light, like, we have to be parents and parent our children and know what our children are capable of. If you have a 13-year-old that understands firearm safety and that's shown responsibility, and maybe you grant that, and maybe you don't if they don't, like, every parent's got to be engaged with their kid. I think when we see kids getting a hold of guns and using them in horrific ways, it's mostly the parents are checked out. Like, they don't realize what's going on with the kid. The kid's, killing animals and antisocial, but they're not, involved in that and watching that and picking up on that and saying, no, so I don't know. Like, I see these stories as another reason why, you can't just arbitrarily just start telling people your kid, because he's not 25, can't, or 21, can't, touch a firearm. I just think that's ridiculous.
Yep. I actually think the way you just said all of that here in the last couple minutes is better articulated than even what I said. So bravo to you.
Oh, that's a feat. It's a feat. Really. You're very articulate.
Final story here out of Atlanta, Georgia. Atlanta rideshare driver shoots alleged police impersonator making phony traffic stop in Target parking lot. I did correct that title because it said making phony traffic, and like they missed a word in there. It just says phony traffic in Target parking lot. I was like, I think they mean stop. We have a 21-year-old man who tried to stop this woman. Here's how it went down. She actually is a rideshare driver, so she's driving for Uber or Lyft or one of those. Of course, most of those folks drive for both where they can. She had provided a ride. It was around 11:35 p.m. and she dropped a passenger off at a motel. And this man, who had so I don't think he's the person that she dropped off, but he's where she stopped or where she parked. She then was blocked in, or attempted to be blocked in, by this 21-year-old suspect with his vehicle. She managed to flee with her vehicle. She takes off. He follows her and pursues her in his vehicle, finally forced her to crash near the Target parking lot. He then approached this woman who, fearing for her safety, shot him. He claimed to be an off-duty police officer attempting to make a traffic stop in his private vehicle. Initial reports said incorrectly identified him as an off-duty security guard. She was not injured during the ordeal. The 21-year-old suspect who was shot was arrested and taken to the hospital in stable condition. He's charged, of course, with numerous offenses, including aggravated assault, impersonating police officer, possession of cocaine, possession of marijuana, and possession of drug-related objects. Needless to say, hopefully he's put away for a time. Pretty scary deal, She's just out and about doing her thing. Of course, I think being a rideshare driver has some inherent risks to that. You're typically providing rides to strangers with no guarantee of what parts of town you're going to find yourself in, because you're at the mercy of their request, and usually late in the evening hours. And of course, we've covered a number of various attacks and shootings and things that have occurred involving people driving for rideshare companies. This one's interesting in how he tried to pursue her with a vehicle, and so a little bit of a vehicle chase, and then of course concluded with a shooting as she felt like her life was endangered from him.
Yeah. I mean, these stories, like, as far as suspects impersonating police officers, they're not like super common, but they happen. And when they happen, I think it like kind of should cause us to rethink about, like, what are our procedures when we get pulled over, right? Like, especially if you're alone at night, in a rural area, if you're ever questioning like the legitimacy of the vehicle that's trying to pull you over, you can always call 911 and continue driving, not like a high rate of speed, like you're trying to get away, but just continue to maintain traffic speed, call 911, say, I have a vehicle behind me. I think it's a police officer. Can you confirm that this is a legitimate legitimate stop? It reminds me, I remember responding to, there's a guy that was riding the trolley and trolley system. He was wearing a security guard's uniform, and was impersonating like an officer and patting women down. Like, so he'd say he's an officer, he's a pat him down, and then he was basically sexually assaulting these women. And I remember these dudes they're just very weird. The ones that perpetrate these officer impersonation, it's a different level, but just if you're ever confronting like that, get on the phone and see if it's legit, for your own safety.
Yeah, it's also easy to see though how this type of, particularly in like this instance, this could happen and occur and develop so quickly.
Yeah.
Obviously, we want to get on the phone as quickly as we can. First things first, right? It's kind of my opinion on this is I often see officer involved shootings where I feel like, and it's important, cops have been trained on the importance of communication, because obviously if they can't communicate and get word out about what is taking place, they may not get the help sent to them that they need. Every second that goes by is another second they're not, getting additional assistance. At the same time, it's kind of like what pilots have to deal with. You might have various emergencies that occur in the air, but the first thing we got to do is we got to continue to fly the plane, right? We have to do our best to continue flying the plane. And in a self-defense situation, our first priority is, well, right now, not die and do what I got to do to prevent that. And I sometimes question whether LE training has taken it so far with respect to communication and in the communication training side of things that it sort of has muddied the waters as far as like, well, we have a problem we need to deal with right now.
Mm-hmm.
But you see shootings all the time. It's fairly common where, it's still an active shooting. And meanwhile, they're taking a hand off the gun and, shots fired, and like still trying to be, engaged with the suspect. And I understand like the desire to get the call out and get help on its way, but we also need to like take care of the most immediate problem in front of us. And that's kind of, how I see a situation like this too. It's like, if this develops so quickly, it's like, well, first I got to do everything I can to evade what's transpiring. And as soon as I am able to, and it's reasonable to do so, get on that phone. I mean, I could obviously, with technology nowadays, my phone might be sitting, might be in a holder. In this case, it probably is in a holder on our dash. She's driving for Uber or Lyft or whatever, right? But using things like Siri or Hey Google or whatever, and being like, hey, call 911, and being able to do that, hands-free can be an important thing to think about and realize. Anyway, interesting story there out of Atlanta. That brings us to a conclusion of today's Justified Save stories. And I guess a conclusion of this episode. Matthew, final words as we put the bow tie on the wrapping paper here.
I'll just say we mention this every so often, but the purpose of doing these stories is not to Monday morning quarterback. Some of it is speculation because we don't know all the facts, right? But what we're doing is we're trying to take these stories and get as much out of it as we can, so we can bring awareness to good things and bad things, make people more thoughtful about the realities of self-defense and violence and how that plays out, and maybe be a little bit more prepared. And also, there is a narrative that firearms are always used for evil. And, even if it's, just our podcast right here and the people that listen to it, that we need to counter that and show the truth, because these are people that, in other cases would be considered heroes. Like the woman who stopped that dude with the AR-15, like other people are called heroes all the time that haven't done like what this woman did, but yet it's just because the culture wants to be so against firearms that they can't even come to say what this woman did was good. And so I think, even if it's just us, to bring light to these people and what they've done. So
yeah. Yep. Thank you. Today's episode sponsored by CCW Safe. Guys, a reminder, check out ccwsafe.com. Use the discount code podcast or CC podcast, CC podcast, save 10%. If you want to research more about various self-defense legal coverage programs that are out there, you can always go to concealedcarry.com/insurance. Get some handy dandy resources there on that page, including a very convenient and also recently updated comparison chart comparing all of the major players in that space. It's usually pretty helpful. I think you'll find by reviewing that like me, you may very well make a similar decision with respect to your own coverage. But most important thing is that you choose the coverage program that is best for you. And also, again, ReadyUpGear.com are the sponsor today, and their fantastic Roger 22 earmuffs over the ear protection. Check them out. Again, ReadyUpGear.com. Guys, we're going to let you go. Have a great rest of your Friday. Have a great weekend. We'll see you back here next week with more podcasts. So that's a wrap. A reminder to train right, train often, and train safe so you can fight hard, fight fast, and fight true.